Well, hello everyone. I hope you're having a great day. We're gonna move now a little bit in the class, some different directions. Last week was focused on the media, this idea about the culture of fear, the consequences of culture of fear. So kind of like that examination, a little bit about TV and film and violence, and sort of this understanding, sort of the impacts of creating this sort of a cultural environment, what that may do from ranging from the individual level all the way to social policies and things like that. The next couple weeks, we're going to focus on music. Before the last 2 weeks, the week number 9 on representations and thinking a little bit more about gender and representations. And then the last week, just kind of an idea about McDonaldization, and we'll talk about that later on. But for this week and next week, it's about music and trying to use music as a vehicle to understand kind of history and understand different aspects of popular culture around this genre of music. I think one reason to study music is to study society, to study social issues, social movements, social change, study all kinds of different aspects of society through popular culture. That's kind of like going back to the first week. I've sort of mentioned that one of the reasons why studying popular culture is to get greater access to the the underlying influences of a social and cultural environment. If we study its culture, ideas are being expressed through culture, ideologies, beliefs, values, positions within a society are being expressed through culture. So if we can examine culture, we can better understand things that are going on in society. So anyway, this week is going to focus on the Beatles in 1964. Maybe not just 1964, but just sort of some different things about the Beatles. We're going to change one of the readings. I went back and looked at it. The articles, she told me what to do, this girl group discourse. I went back over the article. I just didn't think it was, it's interesting. I find it interesting, but I just didn't think it was going to be something that was going to be resonate for more, for most of you. Just because it gets into the technical aspects a little bit about some stuff about discourse and language and sort of the lyrics themselves in terms of what the Beatles focused on. If you want to read it, I think it's fascinating. But rather than doing that, there's going to be a film instead, a film in Canopy that I mentioned called 1964. And I think that the footage and the documentary of 1964, just sort of documenting that particular year, puts you in that time period, the 1964. It's a pretty dynamic and pretty amazing time period in American history. There's a lot going on socially, politically, in the realm of economics. I mean, just so many different things that are going on within the culture of the 1960s. So instead of that girl group discourse article, it's the film on 1964. And hopefully you'll enjoy that much more. So the two articles this week. One of them is on the Ed Sullivan Show, popular show. I mean, it was like the show, that performers, entertainers, come on the Ed Sullivan Show to talk about what they're doing, their projects, and to promote their music or their show, whatever it may be. So it was probably the number one show during its time period, if not the number one show, a highly rated show. There wasn't much choice back in the 1950s, 1960s in terms of programming. So Ed Sullivan Show was the show that people watched. So when the Beatles performed on it, that was a watershed moment for the Beatles. It's exposure to the American audience, and it was also an opportunity for it was just exposure to the American audience, right? So all said there. The thing that's interesting about this particular article, it's focused on not only the Beatles, but also about Bob Dylan and the Rolling Stones and the Doors, about how this national exposure, for the first time, we're talking about the youth and rock music coming out to the American public through this TV form. And there was a lot of concern about lyric content, about the performers themselves. So this article kind of gets you into sort of some of the censorship issues. From today's perspective, we'd scratch our head and say, well, man, what are they censoring? Like, what's the concern? But try to put yourself back in the 1950s, 1960s. I mean, it's a pretty, it's a time of conformity in the 1950s, 1960s. I mean, things are starting to really change during this time period. But TV is really relatively new. It's a new medium. It's a new vehicle for music to be promoted. And yeah, I think it's a fascinating sort of examination about censorship back in the day. And it just kind of gives you a profile of 4 different groups, 4 different bands, 4 different issues going on there. So hopefully you enjoy that read. And then the second one is about imagining strawberry fields, this idea about geography as being, or location being really important, a place of pilgrimage for people who are fans of a particular group or particular band, in this case, the Beatles. And, John Lennon, he was assassinated in 1980 while living in New York City. He was 42, 43 years old. He was young when he was assassinated. And so this memorial there for the Beatles is a powerful one, and it sort of this article speaks to geography as a sense of place, place of pilgrimage. And the reason I included this article, just kind of get us out of kind of the social kind of literature stuff, get us into a different discipline to see that, so that you can see that a lot of different academic disciplines, are dealing with maybe looking at music, looking at the Beatles, but through a little bit different lens. If you're in anthropology, I'm sure there's all kinds of anthropological articles on the Beatles, but they're going to be looking at kind of culture and group and meaning and process. In this case, we're looking at geography. But also, in addition to that, looking at interdisciplinary nature of stuff, I wanted to include this article to give you a sense of the power of music and of a band to define a generation that generation in particular invested in so much meaning towards the Beatles, and a place of tribute for them in New York City and Central Park. It's a pretty powerful testament to certain time periods or certain elements of culture to bring people together, and to create this sort of this identity around things. So good articles, interesting articles. Hopefully you find them enjoyable. Next week we move into looking at jazz, and then sort of history of jazz, and then all the way up to 1980s, 1990s, and hip hop and the emergence of hip hop and its connection to the Black Arts movement. I think it's both those forms of music. I mean, music is phenomenal to look at. In fact, my hat here, kpov.org, our local community radio station here in Bend, Oregon, 88.9 KPOV. Me and myself and a historian from campus, Dean Harris, we do a weekly show on music and culture. Every other week, it's Dean and I in the studio talking about different aspects of music and culture. And then 1 week I'm in there by myself just playing music. 1 week Dean's in there by himself playing music. So check it out sometime. 88.9, you can stream live, 88.9 or kpov.org. You can stream live Fridays from 4 to 5. Check out the show sometime and call in during the show. We won't take the call live on the show, but call in so I know you're listening. That'd be great. Hope you have a great week. Enjoy the readings and enjoy the films that I put out there as far as the links within this week's folder, but also the film and Canopy 1964. Just an amazing time period, and I think those video clips are important to kind of get a sense of recognition, a sense of the time period itself. So anyway, have a great day.